All right, so we talked about methods. We talked about what the hangman game is going to look like by showing the demo. Talked about how to use parameters and return what we want. I'm going to kind of go over some of the pieces of code that you're going to want to use. A lot of you guys have already started doing, when you're checking for a specific case, to either put it to uppercase or to lowercase. All we have to do is we just use a delimiter, the period, so we can say whatever they type, I just automatically want to put it to lowercase, and then that's what I'm going to save as my variable name. Okay, so this is going to be pretty crucial when you're using hangman, in case the person who entered the word put it any of the letters in capital letters. You want to automatically just put it down to something so that you can easily check it. Okay, this is another piece of code that you're going to want to use. Now again, all of these are going to be embedded in their own methods. This is not the only code you need to use, but this is an idea to help give you guys some hints. Okay, so if we think about in hangman, and I typed in hello world, I don't want hello world to be printed out. I basically want spaces for each one like this. And I don't need one for this, for where there's an actual space, only where there's words. So one of the ways that I could do that is I could look at the phrase that they entered and split it where there's spaces. Okay. Now, instead, for arrays, if I have a string array, if I split at the spaces, it breaks it up. So it's not one string, it's multiple strings. So this is one string, this hello, and the world is another string. So then I have to have somewhere where I can store it. This is where a string array would come in, because this could be at index 0 in my array, and this could be at index 1 in my array. If I do that, then I can actually check the length of this word and print out the correct number of underscores. And then I can do the same for this. This is where I would probably want to be using either an enhanced for loop or a for loop where I'm initializing an index number. So if I'm looking at my entire phrase, hello world, and I've already broken it down into an array where this is one position in the array and this is another position, then I'm probably going to want to use an enhanced for loop, and that's where you're going to want to do a little bit of research and tutorials for it if you're not comfortable with it, to say that I am checking each word or each string that is in that string array, and then I can do a for loop inside of that where I could check for the length and print out. Okay, substring, you'll get to see this when you guys are practicing encoding BAT. Substring is a way that I can actually break up a string. So if I wanted to break up hello world into a smaller string where I only wanted the words hello, then that is what substring does. So if I have this stored as a variable and I say substring 0, or the first number here is where you start at, and think of each as like an index. So at index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The last number that you have it going to is the number that it will stop before. Okay. We can also use substring to just say where we want it to start at and just to keep going until we hit the end. So this is a way, and if you practice in coding BAT, you'll get a better handle on this. This is a way that we can build strings however we want. which will be crucial when they do get a letter like L. We need to still replace that L in that guess phrase, but still print the rest of it out as we're checking out. Another piece of code that you're going to end up having to use is the word contains. We can check in our phrase if it contains a specific piece. Now, I designed my game using the guess as a character. You guys could do it as a string. You're just going to have to play around with it. I'm not going to display my full code on how to do that. But if you use the word contains, then you can put in a string to see if it contains that or not. It's going to return a Boolean value, so true or false. So you could use this to see if your phrase, after they've made a bunch of guesses, if it still has any empty spaces. If it has any empty spaces, then they're still playing the game. They didn't get it right. If it doesn't have any empty spaces, then they guessed it. And you can use that in combination with how many turns they have left to see if they've won or if they've lost. Another piece of code, switch, really helps make things easier on here. Switch, again, we can look at in here we can look at I believe it's in decision making. You could see what a switch statement looks like. Really all it is we have some type of expression, so some type of input. Usually it's a number, but it could be strings where you are checking. And switch is a little bit more rigid compared to if statements because we can lock it into specific cases. So if I'm looking for a specific word and I only want it to be one of 4 or 5 choices, that's where I want to use case. Or if I'm looking for a specific number, in this case, I use switch for determining which hangman that I wanted to print with the amount of body parts. So if they had 0 wrong, I'm printing this hangman. If they had 2 wrong, I'm printing this hangman. The word break, which you are using in loops, is another way that we can break out of the switch. If you don't use break, then if this value ends up being true in your case, you will also execute whatever is for this case until you hit a break. So if you only want one case to run, if that's true, then you have to put break between each one of them. Default is what you can use in your switch statements to have a default value that you want to happen if it doesn't match any of your cases. Okay, so this is really, really good for you to be looking through to see how you want your code to run and to help execute it in specific orders. So here, we can put a grade and then check the switch for the grade and check the specific cases. Now notice that character is with a single quote, not a double quote. Okay, and then we can have a default if it's not one of those choices, and then print out based off of that what that grade would be. Okay, let's go back. In your hangman, you're going to end up having to use two game loops. A main game loop, which is going to basically reset your game. It's going to give your information about your game. And a game core loop, which is going to hold all the logic for while you're playing. So all the methods are going to get linked up to your code inside the while loop, which we're going to end up talking about as a class. Okay, so there's a lot of pieces that you guys can use. you're going to need to do some research in Tutorials Point and actually play around with the code in Coding Bat, okay, to really have a good solid feel on it while we're in the planning phase before we jump into actually programming it, okay? All right.